It was an ordinary day when Kimberly Long returned home, but she was about to face the most terrifying moment of her life. Entering the house, she called out for her boyfriend Ozzy, filled with anticipation for his smile. However, as she walked into the bedroom, a pungent smell of blood hit her, and her heart sank. In the dim light, Ozzy lay helplessly on the floor, surrounded by blood, the whole scene resembling a nightmare. Kimberly's heart raced. The sounds around her faded away, leaving only her labored breaths. She crouched down, trying to wake Ozzy, but his eyes had lost their sparkle. Fear and despair intertwined, and Kimberly's hands trembled as tears streamed down her face, overwhelmed by an indescribable pain. In that moment, time seemed to freeze. Kimberly's mind was blank, as she struggled to comprehend the horror before her. A flood of questions rushed through her mind. What had happened? Why was Ozzy here, lifeless? She could hardly believe this was real, as if everything was a figment of her imagination. Realizing she needed to call 911, Kimberly's hands shook uncontrollably, making it difficult to press the dial. When the call connected, her voice was barely a whisper as she informed the dispatcher that her boyfriend was in trouble. The police arrived quickly, and Kimberly stood at the door, her mind still reeling from the image of Ozzy. Her eyes were vacant, her heart heavy with dread. Upon arrival, the police immediately began to investigate the scene. Kimberly watched as an officer entered the bedroom, his expression serious. He meticulously examined every detail on the floor, documenting the blood spatter and Ozzy's position. Kimberly felt helpless, her anxiety escalating as she realized the gravity of the situation. As the investigation progressed, Kimberly felt an increasing sense of pressure. The police began questioning her, and she responded to their inquiries with a mix of anxiety and confusion. All she could think about was her love for Ozzy and the unbearable loss she was experiencing. Each answer she provided seemed to be scrutinized, and the fear was evident on her face. "Why aren't you investigating anyone else?" Kimberly pleaded, her voice tinged with desperation. She hoped the police would understand that she was not the murderer, but Ozzy's loving partner. Yet the officers appeared oblivious to her emotional turmoil, continuing to probe into her motives and actions. As the investigation unfolded, the police discovered records of multiple heated disputes between Kimberly and Ozzy. These records became a basis for their suspicion. During the questioning, they asked Kimberly about the details of their relationship, hoping to find clues that might suggest she acted out of emotional conflict. Kimberly explained that their arguments were normal for couples, and that she never intended to harm Ozzy, but the police seemed unconvinced by her claims. In addition to her testimony, the police found several pieces of evidence. During their examination of the scene, they noted signs of a struggle, with blood spatter on the walls and floor. They speculated that these marks indicated a violent confrontation, yet none of the evidence pointed to anyone other than Kimberly. Investigators believed this suggested the possibility of some form of violent conflict between her and Ozzy. What further fueled their suspicion was Kimberly's emotional response following Ozzy's death. Although she appeared devastated, the police interpreted her reactions as insufficiently intense, sensing an underlying calmness. During the investigation, they inquired about the last time she saw Ozzy and her whereabouts. Kimberly recounted that she had left the house in the evening and found Ozzy's body upon her return. The police questioned whether she had the opportunity to harm him during that time. Meanwhile, the police also examined Kimberly's social media and phone records. They found discussions with friends about her discontent in her relationship with Ozzy, raising the police's concerns that her frustrations could have escalated into tragedy. Throughout the investigation, Kimberly's friends and family were also called in to testify. Although most defended her character, describing her as kind and loving, the police maintained that all evidence seemed to implicate her. Kimberly felt immense psychological pressure, desperately trying to prove her innocence while feeling increasingly trapped in a web of suspicion. In this grim context, Kimberly's life became increasingly desperate. She realized that she had become the target of public scrutiny. Despite her enduring love for Ozzy, the external doubts left her feeling helpless. As the investigation deepened, Kimberly understood that her future might be irreparably altered by this tragedy, as the world around her seemed to judge and condemn her. On the day of the trial, Kimberly Long sat in the courtroom, filled with anxiety and fear. Despite repeatedly asserting her innocence, the proceedings deepened her despair. The prosecution presented a series of so-called direct evidence to the jury, attempting to prove that Kimberly was responsible for Ozzy's death. The prosecution began by showcasing the bloodstains and signs of a struggle at the scene, claiming they resulted from a fight between Kimberly and Ozzy. They detailed the frequent arguments between the couple, emphasizing that such disputes could have led Kimberly to lose control and inflict fatal violence on Ozzy. The prosecutor argued assertively that Kimberly was emotionally unstable and prone to anger over trivial matters, ultimately resulting in tragedy. Meanwhile, the defense team appeared increasingly anxious. They attempted to defend Kimberly by questioning the validity of the prosecution's evidence. However, due to the lack of substantial supporting evidence, the defense's arguments struggled to gain traction. They pointed out that Kimberly and Ozzy's relationship was not entirely violent. In fact, they shared many joyful moments together. The defense attorney insisted that these happy memories should not be overlooked. The jury's attention gradually shifted towards the prosecution's narrative. Although the defense presented emotional counter-arguments, the expressions on the jurors' faces turned serious, indicating a growing skepticism towards Kimberly's testimony. The prosecution's strategy was working, convincing the jury that Kimberly's motives were clear and reasonable. Tension filled the jury as they discussed the case. Several jurors exchanged views on Kimberly, with some believing her emotional response was insufficiently intense, and others expressing doubts about her testimony. As they deliberated, the jurors began to reconstruct their perception of Kimberly, forming an image of her as a potential perpetrator. In the trial's final stages, a surprise witness for the prosecution testified that he had seen Kimberly arguing with Ozzy on the day of the incident. This testimony struck like a bombshell, directly undermining the defense's position. The defense attorney attempted to discredit the witness, claiming his testimony was unreliable. But by then, the jury's confidence had begun to waver. Despair and helplessness were increasingly evident on Kimberly's face. She knew she had done nothing wrong, yet she felt powerless to halt the trial's progression. Each time she saw the jurors deep in discussion, an overwhelming sense of dread and anxiety washed over her. She longed for the defense to present more evidence, but time was slipping away. Eventually, the jury reached a verdict. The news of Kimberly's guilty verdict struck her like a bolt from the blue, shattering her last shred of hope. She could hardly believe that she would pay such a heavy price for a tragic event. As the gavel fell, Kimberly's fate seemed to be sealed, forever altering the course of her life. After being sentenced, Kimberly Long was sent to prison, beginning her long and painful 8-year ordeal of wrongful imprisonment. Upon entering the prison, Kimberly felt extreme discomfort and fear. She was faced with a foreign environment, surrounded daily by the indifferent gazes of inmates and guards. Unable to believe she had been labeled a criminal, she was filled with anger and despair over the unjust trial. Yet the inner turmoil did not cease. Each time she received a letter from her family, she was painfully reminded of her situation. The love and concern from her family warmed her heart, but also amplified her feelings of guilt. She knew she had lost so much due to this unjust verdict, and the weight of her family's sorrow often overwhelmed her. Throughout her long 8 years, Kimberly faced countless trials and tribulations. Despite the harsh judgment from the outside world, she firmly believed in her innocence. She yearned for justice and felt a constant flame of hope for freedom burning within her. Though trapped, Kimberly never relinquished her hope, believing that one day she would see the light again. After 8 long years of wrongful imprisonment, Kimberly Long's plight gradually attracted public attention. Her story spread through social media, and many began to show concern and support for her case. This shift in public opinion became the impetus for a re-examination of her case, prompting her legal team to revisit Kimberly's trial process in search of potential flaws and new evidence. At this critical juncture, Kimberly's family decided to hire a new legal team to fight for her right to a fair retrial. This new team, comprised of experienced criminal defense attorneys, delved deeply into the case. They focused not only on legal details, but also on analyzing the credibility of the evidence and witnesses presented by the prosecution during the original trial. As the investigation progressed, the legal team uncovered numerous issues. They revisited the evidence, finding that some of the prosecution's claims lacked scientific backing. For example, the ambiguity of the surveillance footage cast doubt on the reliability of witness testimonies. Additionally, the lawyers noted procedural unfairness during the trial, where key information had not been adequately presented in court. Through persistent efforts, the legal team discovered new evidence that confirmed Kimberly's innocence. They identified another witness who claimed to have seen a suspicious individual entering and exiting Kimberly and Ozzy's home on the day of the incident. This new evidence marked a pivotal moment in the case. The legal team immediately began to verify the credibility of this witness to present a strong defense in the retrial. The hard work of the new legal team began to pay off. By conducting extensive research and discussions, they successfully drew the court's attention, securing the opportunity for a retrial. Upon learning about the retrial, Kimberly felt a glimmer of hope. Although this came too late, she still yearned for justice. The atmosphere in the courtroom during the retrial was markedly different from before. The new legal team leveraged fresh evidence and raised doubts about the prosecution's case, gradually shifting the perceptions of the judge and jury. Kimberly sat in court, filled with complex emotions, nervous yet hopeful. During the new proceedings, witness testimonies were re-examined, and the legal team offered fresh interpretations of the entire case. As the court gradually accepted the new evidence, Kimberly felt a rising sense of hope for the future. Despite the heaviness in her heart, this retrial provided her with a chance to reclaim her identity. As the retrial progressed, Kimberly's lawyers consistently challenged the prosecution's stance, emphasizing that the relationship between Kimberly and Ozzy was not as straightforward as the public believed. The defense's steadfast position, bolstered by new evidence, prompted the jury to reconsider the case's nature. After several days of tense proceedings, the court finally delivered its verdict. The long-awaited justice that Kimberly had yearned for finally illuminated her path. Her innocence was confirmed, and the outcome of the retrial shocked and delighted everyone involved. In that moment, Kimberly felt a profound sense of relief. Her faith and hope had finally been rewarded, and her future life lay open before her once more. With the judge's announcement, a heavy weight lifted from Kimberly's shoulders, replaced by a wave of relief. She took a deep breath, feeling a sense of long-lost freedom. Although her body remained in the courtroom, her spirit soared into the sky that was finally hers. She understood that this ruling was not only a vindication for her, but also a catharsis for all the years she had suffered. As Kimberly left the courthouse, her thoughts continued to swirl. Even though she had been declared not guilty, the past lingered, making it difficult for her to fully let go. The time and opportunities she had lost could not be reclaimed, and the wounds of her experience would take time to heal. Yet she was determined to view the future as a new beginning. Kimberly resolved not to let her past define her, but to transform her experience into strength and to rebuild her life anew. Determined to share her story, Kimberly began participating in public events, advocating for the rights of wrongful conviction victims. Through speeches and involvement in relevant organizations, she became a voice for many still fighting for justice. Kimberly's journey inspired countless individuals, symbolizing hope and courage. As she gradually adjusted to her new life, Kimberly focused on reclaiming her career aspirations. She worked hard to restore the life that had been taken from her. Although she felt pressure and anxiety re-entering the workforce, Her unwavering determination helped her overcome various obstacles. Kimberly understood that her painful experiences had shaped her into a stronger person. Over time, Kimberly's life began to stabilize as she rebuilt her social relationships and reconnected with friends. While some continued to harbor biases against her past, she no longer let those negative perceptions affect her. She proved her innocence through her actions, gaining respect and recognition from more people. Kimberly's story serves as a reminder that justice may take time, but belief and perseverance can lead to change. Her experience not only reflects on personal fate, but also offers profound insights into social justice. This resilience and hope allowed Kimberly to rediscover the meaning of life after enduring the lows of her journey.